Episode for Beth as far as confronting Perry in a small way. Are we going to get a bigger confrontation? Because that's definitely something that viewers are asking about.
Yes. I mean, I think essentially it has to come to that because as we sort of go further in covering what he's done, what he's going to do, and how deep he's getting with her, there'll have to be a stop put to Perry at some point, and I think it sort of is fitting that it's Beth.
And is that going to be something that we see this season, or is he going to kind of be lingering out there going forward?
You know, I'm not totally sure. I think we have a semi-plan for that, and it's all kind of unfolding now, which is interesting because we're on the, 14th episode right now, so we have 6 more left. I think it's something that viewers are going to want to see, and I think it's something that she's going to have to deal with before the season ends, or right as the season is ending.
How would you like to see her deal with him?
Oh my gosh, how would Maggie like to say? You know, it's interesting because Perry is the kind of character that does drive you crazy because in terms of stalking, he's acting within the law, right? So he's the worst kind of stalker because he knows how far to go, how painful it can be for someone, and how much that gives you a control over someone's life. And when you have somebody who's essentially getting away with what they should be in jail for, you're always going to want to see a bigger confrontation, you know, and a bigger, really, consequence for someone like that.
And now, as someone in the public eye, is that something that you worry about, or you've had to deal with? Somebody who just is a little too enthusiastic?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, actually, too enthusiastic. It's a nice way to put it, and I think it's fitting, you know, because there are people who cross the line in a bad way, and then there's some people who are just very enthusiastic. But I think part of the exploration of this show, and part of what I've learned, not just with our consultants, but a lot of my research and reading, is that sometimes enthusiasm can cross over and turn into something else. So you always have to be mindful of that.
And coming from Nikki, you've had these very strong female powered roles. How is it to kind of step into this role of not almost a victim?
Right, yeah, completely. Well, I think there's such an innate strength to her because, you know, you can categorize powerful women or strong women however you want, you know, depending on if it's their physicality or obviously their mentality or, you know, career, intelligence, any of that. But with Beth, I think part of the strength of her is the vulnerability and understanding that she took a life of not just terror and victimization, but she turned it into something that was going to empower her for others. And that, I think, is the hardest part of being a victim, is finding how to sort of transform that darkness into at least a light, enough of a light where it can benefit someone. In this case, it's not technically benefiting herself, which I think a lot of people do. There's that, you know, they hide from it. And so, you know, in her sort of do-gooder nature, in her way of going out there and being strong for other people, she's really masking a lot of the things that she doesn't want to deal with in her own life. And, you know, whatever we run away from, we run into. And so I think that this has come back to haunt her because it's not something that she's ever truly, she's survived it, but she's not overcome it.
And what kind of consultants have you worked with? Have you talked with like female law enforcement or people, psychologists, psychiatrists, anything like that?
It's interesting. I haven't spoken to any female law enforcement, actually. I don't think there is a female in this unit in particular. Psychologists, yes, there's a few females that I've spoken to. And there's been a lot of really great books in the last few years that have come out about the psychology of the people who do these things. Reading body language, reading mental patterns, reading communication, either gaps or gaps, lapses, or even, you know, intense amounts of communication, what that actually means and where that goes, and the psychology of those things. And that, to me, is really the core of what people do in TAU, what these detectives do in TAU. It's a different kind of crime prevention. It's really unlike any other sort of facet of the law.
Is this something you found yourself kind of putting into practice in your daily life when you interact with people? You're like, I can tell you're lying.
Well, it's interesting because we did a scene last night on the pier, and we have a perpetrator who took a victim in she got away and then became sort of a victim herself because she wanted to jump, you know. And Dylan and I were doing this scene, and there was a moment where she gets very vulnerable and asks her victim to forgive her, you know, please forgive me. And her body language, she comes in a little and she kind of falls down. And there's one ex-police officer, he deals in security, private securities now, who wrote this amazing book, and he talks about body language of people who are violent, potentially violent, or have been. And it was really important to have that moment, because right after she has that sort of crumpling moment, she tries to jump. And a lot of times when we're watching body language, we think that when people look as if they've retreated, that they're about to calm down, they're about to let go. We do it a lot in movies, but the truth is, when people find that moment where they kind of go inwards and they look like they're softening, that's usually the moment right before they turn violent.
Where they're just done.
Absolutely. Where, you know, it's gotten so personal that they can't take it anymore, and they're releasing, and the next moment is something that you don't expect. So it was funny because we were doing that last night, and even though it's not my personal life, I remember watching her, and she did it in one take, and she didn't do it in the other, and I went over and talked to her, and I said, it's really important that you have that moment of surrender before you're about to jump, because that is true to what your body language would be.
Do you think she was even consciously doing it?
No, we in the rehearsal, it was, in film, we just called it a misdirect, where it was just like, oh, well, I'm going to miss it. But the truth of the misdirect is that actually does happen.
And so you've been filming out at the pier here.
Yeah.
How's that been?
It's funny because California's always so sort of sunny and warm, even when it's not. the 2 days we're outside is sort of like torrential rain and black clouds, which is just so odd and ironic. But it's so nice just to be off a stage, you know. I mean, we have a lot in our offices and TAU, so it's really nice to be out and about.
Do you like the procedural aspect of the show where you have this different story every week and there's a different guest star coming in?
Yeah, I mean, I love guest stars, and I do like new cases, and I do find it interesting. You know, I think that anyone in a procedural will tell you that the procedure part of a procedural is probably the least interesting. I think the psychology is more interesting. I think the chase is more interesting. And, you know, in this show, one of the things that I do like is that we get more personal with our detectives, and we do know more about them than you do in your average cop show or procedural show. So I think that would be what I enjoy most.
And we talked a bit with Dylan earlier about the potential tension that's going to have to come between Jack and Beth, as far as, you know, whenever you have male-female pairing, there's always won't they have a actual relationship?
Right.
Is that something you want for these characters?
Do you know what I want in this show? I want a little bit of hope. And wherever that comes, it's going to come. But I think that, you know, you get slighted sometimes when you're dealing with such a heavy subject matter, when you're dealing with life or death, when you're dealing with really the terrorization of people and their livelihoods. And I think within that sort of realm that we have to uncover and discover on the show, we also have to give people something to hope for, and something that, you know, kind of perks them up a little bit, makes them feel good inside, makes them feel like something is going to come together in all this tragedy. Is that Jack and Beth? It might be, yeah. And I think it would be good. I think it would be good to sort of have something that kind of offsets what the heaviness and the darkness of the show.
And it did get a bit heavy when Jack kind of gave Beth his backstory a bit. Are we going to explore that even more going forward?
Absolutely, yeah. Because the only way for Jack and Beth to get close is for them to know each other better. And the thing is, I mean, I think what I find interesting about the two of them is that they both come from, you know, a real place of tragedy and sadness. Some created and some not, you know, some circumstantial. And I think when you have two people who have an understanding of how to survive or come out of something like that, who want to start over and who want something new, there's hope for something there. But I also love the idea, and I think it's more interesting when something is formed out of a knowledge that you like or feel personal about. You know, I don't think anything should be rushed in life or on television. So for them, it's such a major event for either of them to open up to anyone So for that to happen already, that's big for me, and that would almost be enough for me in the first season. But we'll see where we go with it.
And have there been any of the procedural storylines? Because I know you can't give away Stalker spoilers.
Right.
But any of the procedural storylines coming up that you found were fun or interesting?
Coming up, they're all. The thing is, they're all interesting. But I think that the key when it comes to the case of the week is always whether you really truly care about the victims. And I know that sounds strange to say because, well, the victims are always going to care, but in some cases you care more than others. And we did have an episode that already aired. It was 110, and it was an episode about a girl and her friend who were raped in high school, and how she never got over it. And her friend ended up killing herself, and then she ended up seeking revenge for what was done to them. There was something about that episode that I love because it happens all the time. We don't necessarily know how the psychology manifests when people don't deal with something or hide things and sort of stuff, put it away for so long. We don't really know. And this episode was what that manifestation can look like in extreme cases. And we had really great guest stars, and the performances were just fabulous. And so because of that, you really got inside this victim's head, and you went, man, I don't know what I would do if I was that girl. Maybe I would do the same thing. Maybe I wouldn't be as extreme, but I know that I would feel that tragedy and that loss as much as she did. And so things like that really affect me. I think things that are more topical and things where we can explore the emotion of it.
Well, something like that would be pretty timely with current news headlines.
Right. And in news headlines, we're always sort of speaking and uncovering the event, but we don't get into the emotion, not in news. And so when we get to do a case by case every week, we do, as a show, get to explore what the emotion and the fallout is on some of these things, and I think that's interesting.
What do you like or dislike about Beth?
Right. Well, it's funny. The thing I like about her and the thing I don't like about her are the same thing. We talked about sort of strong women and what the definition of that is, and I think that strength it's useful, it's important, and it's helpful to others when you can sort of wield it in the right way. But I also think that strength can really alienate you and cause a real gap between you and what it's like to feel. And I think her strength has helped her, and I think it's really gotten in her way. I don't think that she's been able to really start over yet because the strength has crossed over into an independence that, like I said, is alienating. And that makes it, that makes her life so much harder. And I think she has done that. It's not really her fault, but when she can work that out, I think her life's going to open up in such a different way.
And obviously the show keeps you very busy.
Right.
So do you have any other projects, though, that are kind of in the works?
That's hilarious. Well, I'm on a trilogy of films that I have to do in between this show that I was on before this season. I'll be on, if we get another season this summer, into the next season. So that's my year. It's Stalker and, sort of Divergent, Insurgent, Allegiant. That's my year for the next 3 years if Stalker continues. So, yeah.
And do you have any message for your fans?
A holiday message?
Any message you want to give them?
Well, I think that for the most part, it's just we feel really, really grateful just for sort of our very sort of stable fan base that have come. We have an audience. We're so appreciative because, CBS is a big network. There's a lot of content. There's a lot to choose. There's a lot of networks. There's a lot of shows out there, and we just really appreciate the fact that we have an audience and that they're very loyal. So thanks.